Welcome to this explainer. Okay, we are diving right into a topic today that honestly touches almost all of our lives in one way or another. We're talking about the profound concepts of trauma and collective healing. And to kick things off, I actually want to play a quick game of myth or truth with you.
So, think about this. Does trauma only come from extreme suffering, things like war or assault? Or can it arise from everyday chronic stress, like housing insecurity or just struggling to make ends meet? Take a second and lock in your answer.
Well, if you guessed myth, you hit the nail right on the head. It is a total myth that trauma is rare or only tied to extreme events. In fact, a World Health Organization survey shows that 7 out of 10 people experience at least one traumatic event in their lifetime. 7 out of 10. That means trauma is likely present in the nervous systems of the vast majority of people you interact with every single day.
Since this impacts pretty much all of us, here is our roadmap for today. 1. Rethinking what trauma is. 2. Survival responses in classrooms. 3. The architecture of collective trauma. 4. Frameworks for healing systems. And 5. Creating safe spaces today.
Let's start with Section 1, rethinking what trauma is, specifically looking at the physical reality.
The really fascinating thing here is the word intelligent. You see, trauma isn't a flaw. It's not some kind of weakness. It's actually a brilliant, protective, entirely automatic mechanism. It kicks in when a situation is just completely overwhelming and we simply lack the resources to cope. In that split second, our body prioritizes safety over connection, literally just to keep us alive.
And this completely explains why you can't just will trauma away. We have 2 nervous systems. The somatic system is voluntary. That's what you use when you decide to raise your hand. But trauma responses, they're controlled by the autonomic system, which is involuntary. It runs in the background just like your heartbeat or your digestion. You don't consciously decide to make your heart beat, right? And you don't consciously decide to enter a trauma response. So healing requires actual collaboration with this autonomic system, not just sheer willpower.
Moving right along to Section 2, survival responses in classrooms, looking at trauma manifestations.
So how does this actually show up in the real world, like when a student is trying to learn? The crucial point here is that what a teacher might quickly label as a problematic student might actually be a nervous system actively trying to protect itself. A fight response, well, that often looks like defiance or aggression. Flee looks like absenteeism or a kid just totally withdrawing. Freeze is when a student goes completely silent or their mind just goes totally blank. And then there's fawn, which shows up as excessive, extreme people-pleasing. In all these cases, the nervous system detects danger and organizes for survival, not for learning.
This brings us to a massive, game-changing paradigm shift. If we truly want to support people, whether that's in a classroom, at the office, or even at home, we have to completely shift our perspective. Instead of asking what's wrong with them, we need to start asking, how is this behavior protecting this person?
Now for Section 3, the architecture of collective trauma, dealing with systemic wounds.
Now that we have a handle on the individual nervous system, we need to zoom out. To understand collective trauma, we have to look at collective healing. And here's the thing. Collective healing isn't just a bunch of individuals meditating independently in the same room. It's about actively addressing the ruptures between us. It requires interrelatedness. It's about acting together as a larger interconnected body to really metabolize the grief and the disconnection that we face systemically. But we often get in our own way here. When we're dealing with massive collective issues, think planetary crises or deep systemic inequality, our default setting is almost always urgency. We rush to fix things, but that urgency narrows our attention and actually ends up reproducing the very fragmentation we're trying to solve. On the flip side, the energy of restoration actually slows our perception down. It gives us the space to generate truly coherent, connected action. I absolutely love this quote from systems change practitioner Louise Mara. She points out that when we face collective wounds, the first thing we hit is our own resistance to them, our tendency to disconnect, to overanalyze, or to rush. We literally have to dismantle this invisible protective architecture before any actual deep healing can even begin.
Which leads us to Section 4, frameworks for healing systems, navigating collective change.
To help us safely navigate all this complex systemic work, there are some truly beautiful structured frameworks out there designed specifically for collective change. When you map relational depth against healing wisdom, it perfectly visualizes how a system journeys toward healing. And it is not a straight line. It moves through distinct cycles, resourcing and rooting into the earth,
weaving relationships, cohering, and then eventually metabolizing harm to reach a place of futuring where we can actually envision new possibilities from a healed, grounded state.
Building on that journey, if we look at it from the inside out, there are 4 core intelligences at the center: Earth, ancestral, love, and collective. These naturally ripple outward to build human capacities, which then shift the very conditions of the entire system. And the best part is that this leads to tangible indicators of progress. We're talking about reduced burnout, shifting cultural narratives, and creating actual real-world cultures of care. This isn't just nice-sounding theory, it leads to measurable systemic change. And finally, Section 5, Creating Safe Spaces Today, the Foundations of Healing.
Let's bring all these high-level frameworks back down to earth for a minute. First, we really must understand the difference between curing and healing. Curing comes from an outside expert fixing a problem, but the word healing relates to wholeness. It implies that the power to restore well-being already lies right there within the subject. The exact same life force that keeps your heart beating is the force that heals. We do not have to be trained therapists to spark this. We simply need to provide the safety required for that innate, internal life force to wake up and do its work.
So how do we create that safety? It is highly actionable through really simple resourcing practices. Things like humming, which physically helps settle the nervous system, conscious breathing, which literally bridges our voluntary and involuntary systems, moving together, like dancing or exercising, which helps release trapped survival energy. By just embedding these simple, totally accessible practices into our classrooms, our workplaces, and our homes, we regulate our collective nervous systems. We build that absolute necessary foundation of safety.
Knowing that a regulated, safe environment is the very first critical step to both individual and collective recovery, I want to leave you with this final, hopefully provocative thought. What small, simple practice are you going to bring into your space today to jumpstart that healing journey? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope you take these practices forward into your own life.